Dear friends, my name is Operator Starsky and this is day 1020 of Russia's disastrous invasion of Ukraine. Belarus asked to deploy Russian missiles on its territory. Putin's army collapsed in Syria. What does it mean to Ukraine? President Zelenskyy, Macron and Trump met in Paris and Russians prepare for possible negotiations. What do we know so far about it? This is the Frontline Focus. Let's roll. At the front lines, majority of the Russian attacks this week are taking place in the areas of Pokrovsk and Kurakhove. Over the past 24 hours, the General Staff of Ukraine reported 191 cases of combat, 3,000 artillery strikes also took place, and if we compare this number to November this year, it's 2,000 strikes less than usual. According to the rough estimates, the Russian advantage in terms of artillery comparing to Ukraine decreased from approximately 9-1 to about 2-1, which is still a lot, but the main tendency is obvious. At this point, Russia, and don't forget that it's considered by many as a military superpower, so Russia completely relies on North Korea in terms of artillery shells. Recent satellite images confirmed that DPRK increased its production of shells for Russia, but so did the European Union. And European Union is approximately 20 times wealthier than Russia. That's another important thing to remember. Returning to the front lines, it was reported several times by multiple sources that Russians concentrated impressive forces near Zaporizhia. Also, they concentrated several hundred boats in the vicinity of Kherson. Apparently, they will develop an offensive in these areas to distract Ukrainian defenders from the main directions of the Russian advance in Kurakhove and Pokrovsk. At least this is how it looks like at this point, because Russian terrorists need much more troops to take Zaporizhia than they can afford. Unlike Bakhmut and Avdiivka, which were tiny towns, Zaporizhia is a major city, for example, like Kyiv. The Russians already attempted to take Kyiv early in the beginning of this invasion, and they involved about 20 to 40 battalion tactical groups, and we all know the result. Also, Ukrainian Sea Baby drones attacked Russian helicopters in the Bay of Kerch. Drones equipped with the heavy machine guns controlled by the AI approached the helicopters that were sent to intercept them and opened fire. According to the intercepted radio communications between the pilots and the ground, unknown number of Russian terrorists got eliminated or received injuries. Ukrainian drones turned into a true nightmare not only for the Russian fleet but also for Russian personnel and Russian aviation. Just to remind you, as of today, Russia lost a third of its Black Sea fleet, including its flagship Moskva, and had to withdraw the remaining ships from the Black Sea. Russian troops collapsed in Syria. We have reports on several groups of Russian terrorists being surrounded. The terrorist blogger calling himself a fighter bomber reported that several thousand Russian personnel relocated closer to the shore expecting a redeployment, which raises a question: will they be redeployed to Ukraine? And the answer is, of course, yes. But what does it mean to Ukraine? First of all, let's check how many Russian troops were deployed to Syria. 7 years ago, Russian Ministry of Defense and Stolen Toilets officially reported that its ground forces consisted of approximately 6,000 terrorists, not including so-called Russian police forces. Considering all the involved Russian PMCs, including Wagner, the Russian personnel could be as big as 20,000 men. But at the same time, facing extreme resistance in Ukraine, most of them were redeployed to die in Donbass, which was one of the reasons, by the way, why Bashar Assad's regime lost the war. Once again, Russians don't have an overwhelming manpower, it's a fact, and I would estimate the number of the Russian troops in Syria as approximately 4,000 or 5,000 terrorists, either surrounded or expecting evacuation. Potentially, these troops could enforce the mixed Russo-North Korean gangs in Kursk or sent to the most crucial directions in Kurakhove or Pokrovsk, depending on the situation. One thing we know for sure, it will take quite some time to relocate them to Ukraine because Russian fleet cannot enter the Black Sea via the Bosporus Strait. Russians may use several ways of delivering personnel and most probably by air via Iran. And since most of the Syrian-based Russian aviation is already involved in striking Ukrainian civilians, it won't change anything significantly because there's only so much Russian troops can be deployed in Ukraine at once due to the risk of being exterminated by missiles and artillery strikes, for example, like it happened this year in Makiyivka. As for Bashar Assad, according to the Russian media, he and his family found shelter in the terrorist federation where former Syrian dictator can now peacefully drink kefir with former Ukrainian dictator Viktor Yanukovych. Both were good friends back in 2010 and they won't be feeling bored anymore. Belarusian dictator Lukashenko asked Russia to deploy its Oreshnik/Rubezh ICBM to the Belarusian territory. Now, the reason is not protecting Belarus from Ukraine because Russia and Belarus already signed Mutual Defense Pact. Also, Russia adopted new nuclear doctrine and deployed its nukes on the territory of Belarus. The reason this event attracted so much attention is because it was literally an informational operation, to remind the West one more time about the long-range weaponry utilized by the Russian terrorists. In the Russian media, they often talk about the necessity to defend the western borders of the new Russian Empire, let's call it this way, from the NATO invasion, which means the missiles located in Belarus will be most probably aimed at Eastern NATO members like Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Slovakia. Of course, the Russian terrorists are not aiming these missiles at NATO countries because NATO prepares to invade the Russian Empire. It's done specifically in order to scare Westerners. Also, it's always, Belarus to blame, since Lukashenko is Putin's puppet and whatever Lukashenko does is generally not related to Russia in any possible way. And this is all you need to know about why Russian terrorists deploy their missiles closer to the NATO borders and threaten the civilized world with the nuclear apocalypse, which again will never happen because Russian regime is only playing crazy. In reality, the Russian oligarchs have a really big desire to live a happy and wealthy life, and the nuclear apocalypse is definitely not on their schedule. President Zelenskyy, Macron, and Trump met this weekend in Paris. They had approximately 35 minutes to discuss the situation in Ukraine. At this point, being an elected American president, Donald Trump, of course, cannot make decisions yet, but he and his team are already preparing these decisions. From what we can see, the solution has not been found yet. Of course, it's a really hard task to solve the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There might be ideas that are currently being processed, and when Donald Trump enters the White House, we will most probably hear some kind of strategy regarding Ukraine. What's important is that, as far as we can tell, Trump understands the necessity to work with his European colleagues in frames of stopping the threat of the Russian terrorism, which is good. In the meantime, there are rumors, and please consider them unconfirmed, so rumors coming from the hacker community that allegedly indicate that Russian command on the highest level was given instructions on preparing the Russian population for the possible ceasefire that can be, again, possibly expected next year. Basically, the regional authorities were already ordered to explain Russians what will be considered a glorious victory of Russian people in case Russian terrorists are forced to stop their aggression. The Russian FSB instructed its personnel that in case the ceasefire will be proclaimed next year, after Trump's inauguration, this should be considered a Russian victory. The Russian VGTRK, their main propagandist machine, is of course also involved to shape the proper image of the Russian victory for the population. The Russian Z-patriots will be either re-educated to be happy about the acquired Russian territories in case the conflict is frozen, or the most aggressive ones will share the fate of Igor Girkin-Strelkov and Prigozhin, basically repressed, because this is how it works in Russia, where you cannot criticize Putin and just walk away safely. What's interesting is that, again, according to rumors, the Russian Ministry of Defense and stolen toilets is not involved in this affair whatsoever, because, as usual, Russian KGB wants all the glory and power, and Russian military traditionally will be blamed for all their failures, which, in my opinion, they totally deserve. Dear friends, please subscribe to stay informed about the most important updates and share this content to help Ukraine being heard. Traditionally, see you in the commentaries. I'm Operator Starsky. As always, be safe.